to really have a quality, business like this, they look at their success rate. How many people don't relapse after staying in the program?
This is on the harder end of the spectrum where the information asymmetry works against you in just multiple ways.
So this doesn't have to be like a huge facility, right? You can be running a relatively small scale operation, and when your revenue per head's $100,000, that can be a very, very good business.
So Acquisitions Anonymous.
Hello, another episode of Acquisitions Anonymous.
We don't have 100% geared anymore.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Acquisitions Anonymous. I am one of your hosts, Bill D'Alessandro, and this is the internet's #1 podcast on buying, selling, and operating small businesses. This episode, we have a really cool business. It is a drug and alcohol addiction center in the Mountain West. This business is super profitable. It has a 40% EBITDA margin, and they say their revenue per head is about $100,000 per patient. The other special thing about this episode is you have 5 hosts. Yes, count them, 5 hosts today. It is me, Mills, Michael, and Heather, who you already know. And we have also brought in Connor Groce, who is a franchise consultant who has acquired a couple franchises himself and helps other people buy franchises. He brings a cool perspective to the deals. If you're into franchising, we've also done a couple franchising deals with Connor. So check our website at acquanon.com for those if franchising is something that interests you. And without further ado, I hope you really enjoy this episode of Acquisitions Anonymous. This episode of Acquisitions Anonymous is sponsored by Acquisition Lab. Acquisition Lab and their team, they've been longtime supporters of the pod, and they provide a really great service for people who are looking to acquire a business. So it's created by Walker Dybel, who's become a friend, the author of Buy Then Build, How to Outsmart the Startup Game. So Acquisition Lab's an accelerator with a highly vetted, cohort-based educational and support community for people who are serious about buying a business. So a lot of our listeners like you tune in every week to our deal reviews. You want to get in on buying a business. You're on this podcast because you're trying to learn how to buy a business. But if you're not quite sure where to start, Acquisition Lab is a great place to start. So they exist to help people buy a business and to navigate all those complexities of the process, everything you hear us talking about on the show. They provide a proven framework, tools, and resources that support you all the way from search to close. They do it. There's a whole bunch of educational material and support. So if you're serious about buying a business, check out acquisitionlab.com, or you can actually email the program director, Chelsea Wood, directly. Her email is chelsea@buythenbuild.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Acquisitions Anonymous. You have the full crew today. There are 5 hosts. Going down the list, we have Heather Anderson, we have Michael Girdley, we have Mills Snell, we have myself, Bill D'Alessandro, and special guest today, Connor Groce, who is a professional at franchising and franchise consultant. So he's joining us for a couple shows. So thanks for being here, Connor.
Absolutely. Thanks. All
right. I think this is the first ever Acquisitions Anonymous with 5 hosts. We have to raise our hands or something before we end up speaking. But we have a good deal today. So you guys ready to get into it? All right. I'm going to read this one and then I'll see what you guys think. So this is it's a deal from our friends at Axial. As a reminder, Axial is a marketplace of businesses for sale, and it's a little bit different than like your biz buy sales because the deals on Axial are usually are vetted and they're usually larger. And they're sometimes represented by a sell-side intermediary, which usually means just the whole process is a little bit more professional. So we found this deal on Axial. This is a $2.1 million of EBITDA substance abuse treatment center. It says this recovery clinic is a premier mental health and substance use disorder treatment facility. The center specializes in customized outpatient treatment plans combined with a sober living program targeting long-term sobriety for individuals aged 18 and up. The clinic is recognized for its holistic approach, including dual diagnosis programs and sports therapy, all backed by a prestigious certification such as the Joint Commission, whatever that is, the Joint Commission, very formal, and Legit Script. Key highlights of the deal. High quality certs. They are Joint Commission accredited. They have an A+ rating from the BBB, and they are recognized by Psychology Today. They have strategic contracts and have recently secured access to military and veteran communities, expanding their patient potential significantly. This contract can generate more than $100,000 of revenue per patient. We'll come back to that. Wow. They have a diverse payment model. 75% of their patients use insurance, which they say is primarily out of network, while 25% of patients are self-pay. The business does not rely on state health insurance, which leaves room for future growth in that sector. Their services and facilities include treatment programs. They offer PHP, IOP, and OP levels of care with dual diagnosis options. We're going to need to unpack that statement. Treatment includes holistic therapies such as outdoor and equine therapy. They also have a sports therapy program, which is a unique component tailored for athletes, offering recreational activities to complement their recovery. And their facilities include a large office and multiple sober living houses within close proximity, with leases transferable to the new ownership. So here are their financials. We have 2022 and 2023 financials. In 2022, they did $3.5 million of sales and $1.1 million of EBITDA. And in 2023, they did $5.2 million in sales and $2.1 million of EBITDA. So that means year over year, they grew revenue 48%, and their EBITDA margin is an incredible 40%. The geography of this business is the U.S. mountain region, and they do alcoholism and drug addiction and counseling programs. And that seems like they're an inpatient facility. So that's what I got. Thank you to our friends at Axial. What do you guys think of this deal? Do you guys understand this deal? What does this do?
It's addiction treatment. So you've got sober houses. You've got, it sounds like outpatient therapy clinics. So I guess I kind of first would want to know, like, how many houses, how many clinics, how many clinicians, just to kind of get an understanding of what the mix of general services are. But I think, most of the time they make most of their money on the inpatient care. And it's all about like how long they stay, so how much per patient you are getting. But to really have a quality, business like this, they look at their success rate. How many people don't relapse after staying in the program. And I think that's a really key thing to know. Also, in terms of there's a stigma around this industry. I'll just say it. There a lot of lenders don't like it at all, even, if the particular deal happens to be good, because the stigma is that there's a lot of fraud. There's a lot of kind of revolving door with doctors that allow, the same person to go back in and out, and they're not really trying to cure them or really help them. They're just making money off of them. That's the stigma. I'm not saying that has anything to do with this one, but you have to kind of know that going in and really look at the quality of care that's going on, where they're getting their patients, kind of test it for whether it fits sort of in that category or not. And that usually comes down to how many, what is their rate of success of people that don't end up relapsing.
Do you guys know what PHP, IOP, and OP levels of care are?
PHP stands for Partial Hospitalization Program. IOP stands for
Intensive Outpatient.
And so, so there's multiple levels of care in the continuum of addiction treatment. Level 0.5 is prevention and early intervention. Level 1 is outpatient program, so that would be OP. Level 3 is a residential or an inpatient program. I believe that's IOP. And then there is an intensive inpatient program, which I guess is an IIP. So there's just varying levels of care, some of which involves hospitalization and some doesn't. And I assume the hospitalization, because some of these drugs, when you go through withdrawal, like you run the risk of death.
Yeah,
it's rough.
They also say they offer dual diagnosis options, which means that, very often you're not just being diagnosed with substance abuse disorder or addiction. You're also being diagnosed with depression or, some other underlying condition that is driving the addiction. I imagine this is good for two reasons. One, because it allows them to actually attack the root of the person's problem, but it's probably also good for insurance billing. If I had to guess, you can probably bill them under under different codes, and maybe the billing for certain diagnoses is higher than for addiction. So they're able to both actually help the people, but they're also able to get compensated for it, if they're addressing the root cause of the problem.
Well, so far, Heather wins the award for knows most about this space. So don't everybody speak up at once.
Oh, well,
Heather,
I'll talk
what is it
about
with
the
you and the
equine
drugs?
therapy part too. I'll talk about the equine therapy part because they had me at that. I was like, oh, okay, equine therapy. I want to buy it now. I'm a horse person, and I have seen programs in my neighborhood where they brought, folks out from one of these kinds of programs, and just being around horses. And, I think it is good. I think but a lot of the programs will have something like that. It's not that hard to add. It's not like they have to have a stable of horses of their own to do it. I think the sports part of it is pretty interesting because you want to look, all of these kind of have to have a niche of some kind. I've seen them in my state of California, like the Malibu area, where it'll be like high-end real estate and come to our sanctuary, and they're really attracting folks with a lot of money. There's no insurance there. They're just paying a lot of money, wealthy people, sending family members or whatever. They've all got to have some kind of niche. So this one sounds like, you're in the Colorado mountain region, and they're using some kind of sports as part of the program, which I think is great. I think that's a pretty smart one, and it's going to attract a certain type of patient to whom that is appealing. So I think that's great. You're showing us the video. Cool.
I pulled up the website for
Rehab. Is what that
this
says.
is.
Luxury Rehab, Malibu. Yeah.
Of the first type that you mentioned, this is called Passages Malibu, which when I clicked had outbid everybody else on Google AdWords. So This is probably one of those categories in Google AdWords that's like $100 a click. And
right.
Yeah. So if you're not watching this on video, you're missing out. They have a guy doing curls and a guy like having a breakthrough on the beach.
Acupuncture.
Yeah.
He even comes back home to his family. There's an embrace on the front porch, and it's what looks like a $10 million home. So, sign me up.
Right. These are the high end, almost kind of celebrity family member type rehab centers that you'll find. They're not all in California, of course, but there's quite a few in the Malibu area along the coastline there. That's their niche. So, each rehab program, you kind of have to look at what the niche is and who's paying. And once again, we've got, insurance paying 75% out of network insurance, which means, they've got some coverage, but they're probably paying a lot of it out of their pocket. So you are probably talking about a little bit more high end patient clientele. They're paying a lot out of pocket or they're paying it fully out of pocket, 25%. As the ones I've seen, the really high end in Malibu, the best ones, they don't, as far as a business is concerned, they don't take insurance at all. They're all private pay, fully out of pocket. And they prepay a huge chunk of that, when someone comes into treatment. So that's the other thing to kind of understand is, when do you get paid on these? Depends on whether it's private pay or insurance, of course. And it kind of helps you understand what the cash conversion cycle is. How long are you waiting to get paid? How much in expense are you laying out before then? These are also usually pretty heavy on payroll. These are the kinds of businesses where your biggest expense is payroll and real estate. You've got a lot of people to manage this, and high-end, salaries, higher-end salaries. And then you've got a lot of facilities. You've got clinics, you've got sober houses. Sometimes the business owns the sober houses and sometimes they rent them. This one, it seemed to say that they are rented, or you would be renting them, whether, the seller owns them and just is not selling them. So there's a lot of operating costs to these businesses. So I think kind of figuring out the working capital is pretty important.
Hi, Heather here. When I'm not breaking down deals with these guys, I'm helping people get the right SBA loans for their business acquisitions. Because when you're buying a business, the best financing isn't one size fits all. There's the best rate, fastest to close, the specific loan structure that you need, or a little of all of those things. That's why my company, Viso Business Capital, works with over 30 different lenders to find you the best funding in less time and with less friction, so you can focus on the deal. Sign up for a free live Q&A session on SBA loans at visocap.net, then click Zoom sign up in the top right corner. That's visocap.net and click Zoom sign up.
looking at this, I'm actually really surprised that it's 75% insurance paid, because this strikes me as the kind of place that, Heather, kind of fits what you referenced, in that you have certain high-end providers that are exclusively working. I don't know if it's just that I don't have enough exposure to these, but I'm surprised that something that is this upscale is still falls within the insurance category, because that does change the way that I view this.
Yeah, and that's out of network, so probably not a lot of it is being paid, in those cases by the insurance. There's probably sort of a dollar limit, and then the patient is paying the rest. So you kind of have to find that out to know, how much is really coming out of the patient's pocket and what type of clientele are they really serving. But my guess is it's pretty high end.
And Heather, earlier you referenced a certain type of this care that was the most profitable. Can you remind me what that is?
Well, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's the longer you keep, it's all about how much you get per patient is all about how long they stay in the program. So if you've got kind of some patients that need to stay in longer term, that's where that 100,000 per patient up to. I think what you'd find is to get 100,000 out of one patient care situation, it's a long treatment cycle. Like that might be a 6-month treatment cycle. And so what you look at is how long is the average patient staying in the program. And this one seems to be designed for the long haul because it's got all those different levels of care. You can come in intensive and in hospital and, graduate out to the lower levels of care over the long term. And that probably results in better outcomes, I would guess, as well. So it's all about how long the patients are staying in the program and what levels of care.
So Mills, you and I did one a couple months ago that was for kids, right? Out somewhere in the middle of nowhere, Utah. This one's for adults.
The thing I think about with this type of business and this industry is, who are like the power buyers, and why haven't they picked this up? There's been so much consolidation in the last 10 years in this arena. And it may be that it's just kind of mature and long in the tooth, and this person has, waited a while. But my guess is that, if this doesn't just create an incredibly competitive bid process, then there's a reason that everybody has already passed on it. And, all the characteristics that we're talking about, payee dynamics, level of kind of semi-skilled all the way up to skilled, care, all of those things go into like a very rigorous analysis for these repeat buyers. And I just think, if you're a person who's never bought a business before and you're thinking, do I want to buy a home service business? Do I want to buy a small manufacturing business? Do I want to buy something e-commerce? Do I want to do a franchise? Do I want to do this? This is on the harder end of the spectrum, where the information asymmetry works against you in just multiple ways. So it scares me because I really don't know that much about it, except that there's a lot of money, in this segment of the market. We haven't even talked about like the next step in the cycle after this is methadone clinics, which there's been a lot of consolidation and acquisitions in that arena, because you basically have people who were reliant on this in perpetuity, right? They have to go, and they can't self-administer. They have to go daily or, multiple times a week to be administered methadone because it's controlled. So it's an interesting world that I just really admittedly don't know that much about.
A good question. Like, given the money in this space, why hasn't it been rolled up, right? Private equity typically does not have a lot of morals about stuff. So like, they're not going to be scared of the value here. Which is kind of one of the interesting things about the fundamentals of kind of asset management, venture capital, like AUM type stuff, is like all the money comes from these big like endowments like Harvard University, and they go give the money to some VC or some private equity person who then occupies and does all the dirty work for them and is comfortable putting money and making money from addiction, right? But anyway, sorry for going off on a tangent. With 5 hosts, I promised myself I wasn't going to do tangenting today. But what I'm not seeing, Mills, is that nobody's rolled up this space. Like, I'm not seeing a big chain, right?
There's a bunch. There's a bunch.
Yeah.
So like just Googling around a little bit, and this is a little bit dated, but like some of the big names I think on platforms was like Baymark, Medmark, BART programs, and then they did a bunch of, add-on acquisitions. Mm-hmm. So just Googling around it a little bit, I don't know them, but I don't think it's as in your face, We just recently did roof repairs on a methadone clinic, and the guys came away and they're like, it was the most bizarre thing. Like, people just really seemed like zombies at 8:00 in the morning. But there's no like big banner. It's not like plasma, right? Or things that are a little bit maybe similar, but there's not as much of a stigma to. So I don't know that you get the same kind of headline notoriety with this.
Yeah, they have been rolled up by private equity from what I've seen. And that's typically who the buyer of something like this is. I occasionally see them out of that network and sort of in SBA kind of searcher, but it's hard to buy something like this unless you have experience, at least in healthcare, at least in managing healthcare businesses. It's tricky for just the average buyer to come along and think that they could do this. But yeah, absolutely. Private equity has been rolling them up. So I wonder, if that's where this one ultimately ends up. Or you have a seller who doesn't want to be part of one of those systems, maybe, who kind of bucks that trend and wants to sell and keep it independent. And they're looking for a very particular type of buyer, perhaps.
I was just going to say another thing that, could be the case is just given that they grew at 48.6% year over year between 22 and 23. I mean, two things could be happening. They could just be wanting to sell into that level of strength. But the other thing I wonder about something like this is, given that you do have the facility constraints, is are they just maxed out, beyond where they're going to be able to grow revenue anymore? And clearly the margins improved a lot between, 2022 and 2023 too. So clearly there's some type of inflection there where, I don't know, they could be trying to sell at the top.
I think what Mills and I saw also with the one in Utah was it was so far out in the middle of nowhere. Remember that one, Mills? It was like,
there was like an element of it. It's like you're going to a ranch, like there's the detached nature of it was, I think, a feature, not a bug.
Yeah. And the equine nature of this, while hugely appealing to Heather, has me worried that if I look at most of these that are out there, like there's 5 or 6 here in San Antonio, there, where I am. And then the one in LA is in Malibu, which is right next to LA. Like, I wonder how much of a disadvantage it is owning one of these when you're out of the country, especially if, you think about your family. Like, does your family want to be driving out 7 hours to the middle of nowhere, Utah, to track you down and visit you on the weekends? Probably not. And especially if you're doing insurance and targeting a lot of poorer people, they're not signing up for a flight and that kind of stuff to go far away.
I don't know that you're specifically targeting poor people just because it's insurance.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that. And I also think there's a lot of people who want to live in the middle of nowhere, Utah, and like this could be very romantic for the right family and right person. Maybe Michael, that's not for you, but I think
hey, we can't all live in San Antonio. Okay.
Bill,
we wouldn't have any diversity in the podcast.
Bill, if living in the middle of nowhere with no people in Southern Utah is so romantic, how come nobody lives there?
It's a niche. It's a niche. It's a niche, like any other niche.
I think sometimes with addiction treatment, there is a thought that removing them from where they are living, where they've been abusing, is a good first step. Go somewhere else, be somewhere else, and start the new habits there.
Yeah, I actually think this could be quite a good business. I mean, you saw they've just landed new contracts where they say that revenue per patient is $100,000 in the military and veteran communities. So they have 5.2 million in sales here. That's potentially 50 people, basically, to care for. So this doesn't have to be like a huge facility, right? You can be running a relatively small scale operation, and when your revenue per head's $100,000, that can be a very, very good business, especially because this is, I guess there is the partial hospitalization, the intensive outpatient, and the outpatient. But assuming your balance there is right, your costs don't have to be very high.
It's almost shocking, that their costs are managed so well, given that this is not, this isn't direct to consumer e-commerce. This isn't SaaS margins, right? It's not software. This is a skilled business. There's actual employees, and they're actually providing a service on premise. It looks like in almost all of these cases. That says something to, I don't know, being in the path of maybe declining margins as there's more competition, or as, there's maybe regulatory pressure, or that would worry me long-term about the sustainability of the margins.
I don't know.
I think it's the demand side that really drives these businesses. Unfortunately, that's the sad news. Yeah, it's the growth in addiction in this country, and people willing to pay more for quality services to potentially overcome it.
That's what makes this business so good from a margin perspective, is that you're not just selling like 2 weeks of hotel room in beautiful Colorado. You're selling an outcome, which is that at the end you won't be addicted, right? And so you can charge a lot more for that, and insurance is going to help pay. And that lets you sell functionally the same thing for just a much higher price.
And the other thing I think about just on the, the regulatory and political side of this is, like, given the political climate and you combine that with the demand side, I don't think that, while obviously the government touches this and that is going to be a factor, I just don't see it being a politically viable, move to make any moves that are going to be a net negative to, having more substance abuse options in the future, just unfortunately given the demand side of things.
So I think we've got enough interest. I'm getting the book. Mills, how about you? Thumbs up or thumbs down?
No.
Out. Connor, thumbs up or thumbs down?
I think it's interesting. I just don't know enough about it. I'm not the right buyer.
All right. Heather, yes or no?
Yes, I wouldn't be the operator, but I like the business. Yes.
All right. Girdley, if this was in San Antonio, thumbs up or thumbs down?
Yeah. No, objectively, I think it's a great business to be in. And we haven't really talked about it. Like, if you do this with a highly principled, approach to it, you're going to help people. And I think that's great. So I'm a thumbs up from that reason. I don't know if I'm the right buyer. I'm probably in the Connor bucket. But I think, if this is a program that's doing things the right way, I'm a thumbs up.
All right. Enough interest that we like this. If you are in this space, if you are in the drug and addiction therapy space, we would love to hear from you on Twitter. Tweet us at ACQUAnon on Twitter, or X, whatever it's being called these days. Or go to our website, acquanon.com. If you're interested in more healthcare deals like this, we have all of our almost 400 backlog of episodes tagged by industry. So you can kind of listen to a customized Acquisitions Anonymous feed of just the deals that you're into. So check us out on our website, and you can also get it on our newsletter, where we will email you when we do new deals that you are interested in, so you don't miss any episodes. So that's going to do it for this episode of Acquisition Anonymous. Thanks to Connor Groce for joining us, and we will see you guys next time.